They actually put one in my class.
Dr. Helen Caldwell didn't even try to whisper. 28 students heard every word. Miles Montgomery, the only black face in the room, heard it clearest.
Look at you, sitting there like you understand a single thing on that board.
You belong in a remedial hall somewhere, not wasting my oxygen.
Here. Impossible math. The kind that requires an actual brain. It'll prove once and for all, your kind was made for pushing brooms, not pushing numbers.
She folded her arms, grinning, waiting for the humiliation. Miles picked up his pencil. 40 seconds later,
Dr. Helen
he put it
Caldwell.
down. Caldwell looked at the page. Her grin died. What happened next destroyed her entire career. Man, she picked the wrong person to test. Let's get into it. Before we get to what happened next, you need to understand where this took place and why nobody stopped it. Whitfield Preparatory Academy, North Shore, Chicago. The kind of school where buildings have names, donated by families who've had money so long they forgot where it came from. The parking lot looked like a luxury dealership. BMWs, Mercedes, the occasional Porsche, just to show off. The hallways were polished marble, Latin motto carved above the front entrance. Framed portraits of alumni who became senators, CEOs, federal judges. Every inch of that school whispered the same message. You're either one of us or you're trespassing. And the crown jewel of Whitfield? The mathematics department. 6 straight years of state recognition. A P-calculus pass rate? 98%. The best math program in Illinois. Maybe the Midwest. All of it built by one woman, Dr. Helen Caldwell. Now, let me be clear. Caldwell wasn't stupid. That's what made her dangerous. 22 years teaching, master's degree from Northwestern, 2-time Teacher of the Year. She published worksheets that schools across the state used in their own classrooms. When parents toured Whitfield, admissions always walked them through her class first. She earned her reputation. That part was real. But underneath it was something else. Something she never said where administrators could hear. She believed her program was excellent because of who was in it. And she believed Miles Montgomery, a black kid from the South Side on a scholarship, was a threat to everything she built. She never used slurs in emails, never put anything in writing a lawyer could grab. Instead, she said things like this. We need to be honest about preparation gaps. I refuse to lower my standards. That wouldn't be fair to students who earned their place. Some students need a different environment. No shame in that. You hear those words and they sound almost reasonable, until you realize every single one was aimed at the same kid, the only kid who didn't look like the rest. Miles Montgomery arrived at Whitfield on a Tuesday in September. His grandmother, Ruth, drove him in a 2004 Honda Civic with a cracked taillight. She parked between a BMW and a Range Rover and didn't blink. Miles wore the school blazer, brand new, bought on sale, one size too big. He carried a backpack and a composition notebook, so the cover was peeling. That notebook went everywhere with him. Every class, every lunch break, every bus ride home. Here's what nobody at Whitfield knew about Miles Montgomery. He taught himself calculus at 13. Not from a tutor, not from a program. From a textbook he found at a library book sale. 50 cents. The spine was cracked, and someone had scribbled notes in the margins. He read it cover to cover in 3 weeks. Then read it again. By 15, he was solving problems on MIT's open math forums under an anonymous username. Graduate-level problems. The kind that take PhD students in the afternoon. Miles solved them in his grandmother's kitchen, between dinner and dishes, writing in that same composition notebook. His public school didn't have AP Math, didn't even have a functioning math club.
When the district cut funding, Miles lost the only class that challenged him.
The Whitfield Scholarship was his only way forward. He took it knowing exactly what it meant. Walking into a building never designed for someone who looked like him. From day one, Caldwell made the rules clear. Not with words, with actions. She assigned Miles the back corner seat, farthest from the board, closest to the door. Like an afterthought she wanted easy to remove. She forgot to include him on the materials list 3 times. When he scored 96 on the first quiz, she didn't congratulate him. She ran his paper through a plagiarism check. He was the only student she checked. When the results came back clean, she said nothing, just handed it back, face down, like it smelled. Every single day, Miles sat in that back corner and did the work. Didn't complain, didn't argue. Just solved the problems, turned in the papers, and went home to his grandmother's kitchen. But something was coming. Something Caldwell had been planning for months. Every year, Whitfield held Open Classroom Day. The school's best teachers gave live demonstrations in Founders Hall. 300 seats. Parents, board members, administrators, and every math student watching. It was Caldwell's stage, her show, her proof that she was the best. This year, she had a plan for Miles Montgomery. She just didn't know he had one too. 3 weeks before Open Classroom Day, a Wednesday morning, room 214. Caldwell walked in carrying a stack of test papers. She placed them on her desk, straightened her glasses, and smiled at the class. That smile, the one she used when she was about to enjoy something. Weekly exam, 5 questions, integration applications. You have 30 minutes. She moved down the rows, handing out papers, one by one. Same white sheet for every student, until she reached Miles. She stopped. Looked at him like she just noticed something on the bottom of her shoe. "Oh, Miles, I almost forgot about you. I made yours special." She pulled a separate sheet from her folder, different paper, different questions. She placed it on his desk slowly, deliberately, pressing it down with one finger like she was pinning a dead insect. Same 5 questions as everyone else, but I added a little something extra on number 5. A real challenge. My graduate school classmates couldn't solve it, I thought. Since you seem to think you're above the regular curriculum, you should have something that matches your confidence. She leaned in close enough for only him to hear, but the front row caught every word. Try not to cry when you get stuck. She turned and walked back to the front. The class went quiet. Not the normal test-taking quiet. The kind of quiet that happens when everyone knows they just witnessed something ugly. And no one wants to be next. Daphne Sullivan, Caldwell's star student, front row center, glanced at Miles's paper. She saw question 5. Her eyes widened slightly. She recognized the structure. That wasn't a high school problem. That was a graduate-level optimization with multi-variable constraints. The kind of question designed to make people quit. Caldwell sat at her desk, crossed her legs, watched Miles like a cat watching a mouse walk toward a trap. Miles read the paper, all 5 questions. Then he read question 5 again. And again. For 30 seconds, he didn't move, didn't write, didn't breathe, it seemed. 30 seconds of absolute stillness. Caldwell's lips curled. There it was, the freeze, the proof. She was already composing the email to the vice principal in her head. Words like overwhelmed and misplaced and better suited for a supportive environment. Then Miles opened his composition notebook. Not the test paper, the notebook. He picked up his pencil and he started writing. Not fast, not frantic. Steady, like a surgeon making the first incision. The room was silent except for pencils scratching paper. But something was different about Miles's scratching. It was continuous. No pausing, no erasing, no going back. 9 minutes. That's all it took. Miles put his pencil down, closed the notebook, folded his hands on the desk. He was the first one finished. By 11 minutes. Caldwell noticed. She stood up from her desk, walked to the back corner, looked down at his notebook. What she saw made her face do something it had never done in 22 years of teaching. It went blank. Completely, totally blank. Like someone had pulled the plug on every expression she owned. She stared at the page for 4 full seconds. Then she closed the notebook, pushed it back toward him. Interesting approach, Miles. We'll see how it holds up when I grade it properly. She walked away, heels clicking on the floor.
Back straight, jaw tight. She didn't look at him again for the rest of the period. But Daphne saw Caldwell's face in that moment, and for the first time all semester, Daphne Sullivan wasn't sure her teacher was the smartest person in the room. The question now was simple. Would Caldwell give Miles the grade he earned? Or would she find a way to bury it? The next morning, Miles found his graded test in the return pile. He flipped to question 5. Red ink, 92 out of 100.
8 points deducted. The note read, "Method unclear. Did not follow the standard approach. Partial credit only." Miles stared at those words. Method unclear. He used modular arithmetic, a technique that avoids assumptions the standard method requires. His answer was correct. His method was valid. It was actually shorter and more reliable than the textbook approach. But it wasn't Caldwell's way. And in her classroom, her way was the only way. Miles folded the paper, put it in his bag, didn't say a word. That afternoon, Caldwell posted her model solution for question 5 on the class bulletin board. She pinned it neatly, typed, formatted, her name at the top. A clean presentation, the correct approach for everyone to study. Underneath, she wrote, "This is the standard methodology. All future exams will be graded exclusively on this method." That note wasn't for the class. It was for Miles. But here's where Caldwell made her mistake. Not a small one. A devastating one. During lunch, Miles stood in front of the bulletin board. He read Caldwell's solution, line by line, step by step. He read it the way a surgeon reads an X-ray, not looking for what's there, but for what shouldn't be. And he found it. Step 3. Caldwell's solution assumed that the variable x was always greater than 0 across the entire domain. She never tested the boundary. She never checked what happens when x equals 0. She just assumed it couldn't, and built her entire answer on that assumption. But Miles knew better. He'd seen this exact trap before. 2 years ago, on an MIT open forum, a graduate student posted a similar problem. The thread argued about it for weeks. Miles spent 3 weeks in his grandmother's kitchen working through every edge case. He knew what happened at the boundary. When x equals 0, the function behaves completely differently. Caldwell's optimal answer doesn't just become inaccurate, it becomes wrong. Flat out, provably, mathematically wrong. Miles opened his notebook. Right there, standing in front of the bulletin board, he wrote a clean correction on a single page. First, he identified the hidden assumption. Step 3 assumes x is always positive. That's never proven, it's just assumed. Second, he constructed a specific boundary case, a concrete set of values where x equals 0. Simple numbers. Easy to check, undeniable. Third, he showed the consequence. Plugged those values into Caldwell's final answer. The result was worse than a basic approach. Her optimal solution was actually inferior at the boundary. Fourth, he solved it correctly, using modular arithmetic, the same method she deducted 8 points for. On the page, his solution was 4 lines, clean, elegant, correct in every case, including the one Caldwell missed. He tore the page from his notebook, pinned it right next to Caldwell's solution on the bulletin board. Then he picked up his bag and walked away. No announcement, no drama, just the math, side by side, for anyone who cared to look. By noon, they were looking. It started with 2 students from the honors track. They stopped, read both solutions, and pulled out their calculators. 5 minutes later, they called their friends over. By the end of lunch, there were 15 students crowded around the bulletin board, checking, rechecking, whispering. One by one, the same realization hit. Miles was right. Caldwell was wrong. Daphne Sullivan pushed through the crowd. She read Caldwell's solution, read Miles's correction. Then she sat on the hallway bench and did the boundary calculation herself from scratch. Her face went through 3 stages: confusion, verification, then something she clearly didn't enjoy feeling, the realization that she, Caldwell's best student, hadn't caught it either. She looked up from her notes and said quietly, to no one in particular, "He's right." By the end of the day, the entire math department had heard about the bulletin board. Students, teachers, even a few kids from other departments who just wanted to see what the fuss was about. Then, Caldwell found out. She walked to the bulletin board at 3:15. The hallway was empty by then. She read Miles's correction. Her eyes moved across the page once, twice. Her jaw tightened. She unpinned both papers, hers and his, folded them together, and carried them to her office. 20 minutes later, Miles was called in. Caldwell sat behind her desk, door closed, hands folded, voice controlled, but barely. "Miles, what you did today was unacceptable." Miles said nothing, waited. Publicly posting a so-called correction to a teacher's work is not how we do things at Whitfield. If you had concerns, you can come to me privately. What you did was disrespectful, arrogant, and disruptive to the learning environment. Miles looked at her, calm, steady. "I didn't correct you, Dr. Caldwell. I just showed the boundary case. The math doesn't care who wrote it." 5 words landed like a hammer. The math doesn't care who wrote it. Caldwell stared at him. 3 full seconds of silence. "You may go." Miles stood, walked to the door, opened it. He didn't slam it, didn't look back, just left. But in that office, behind that closed door, something had shifted. Caldwell knew. And Miles knew she knew. The math was on the bulletin board for 6 hours. 15 students confirmed it. Daphne Sullivan confirmed it. The evidence was already out. Caldwell could take down the paper. She could silence the conversation. But she couldn't take down the truth. And now the question was, what would she do with it? Accept it? Or make Miles pay for it? Caldwell didn't accept it. She escalated. See, most people, when they get caught making a mistake, they get quiet. They adjust. Maybe they learn something. Not Caldwell. The bulletin board incident didn't humble her. It threatened her. And threatened people don't retreat. They attack. Within 48 hours, she rewrote the grading policy for her class. New rule, effective immediately. All exam answers must follow the prescribed standard methodology taught in class. Alternative methods, regardless of whether they produce the correct answer, will receive partial credit at best, 0 credit at worst. She announced it with a straight face, called it academic consistency. Every student in the room knew who that rule was for. It was a cage built specifically for Miles Montgomery. His greatest strength, the ability to see problems differently, to find faster and more elegant paths, was now officially a liability. If he solved the problem his way, he'd lose points. If he solved it Caldwell's way, he'd be forcing himself to use a method he knew was sometimes inferior. And she wasn't done. She reassigned Miles to a group project with the two lowest performing students in the class. The project counted for 20% of the semester grade. No matter how brilliant Miles's individual work was, his group score would drag him down. Then came the email, sent to Vice Principal Dr. Warren Ellison. Subject line: Concerns regarding student conduct. Miles Montgomery. In it, she described Miles as consistently disruptive, resistant to established academic protocols, and exhibiting behavioral patterns that suggest he may not be suited for the advanced track. She recommended he be moved to a standard mathematics course for his own benefit. She never mentioned the bulletin board, never mentioned her error. The email read like genuine concern from a dedicated teacher. If you didn't know the context, you'd believe every word. The system was closing around Miles, and it was closing fast. His test scores started dropping, not because he was getting answers wrong, because he was getting docked for incorrect methodology. 88, 82, 78. His grade slid from a solid A to a B+, heading toward B. Whispers started circulating among students. Maybe the bulletin board thing was a fluke. Maybe he just got lucky on that one problem. I heard Caldwell said he has attitude issues. That's how it works. You don't have to destroy someone with one blow. You just keep cutting.
Small, precise daily cuts. And eventually people stop seeing the blood. They just see someone falling behind. Only one person in that classroom knew the full truth: Daphne Sullivan. She'd verified Miles's correction herself. She knew his method was sound. She knew the new grading policy was a weapon.
And she wrestled with that knowledge every single day. Then one evening, after class, Daphne did something small, something that changed everything. She left her personal study binder on Miles's desk. Didn't say a word, no note, no eye contact. Just the binder, open to a specific page, where she had solved the latest exam problem using Miles's modular arithmetic method. Her handwriting, her work, his approach. The message was silent but clear. I checked. You're right. I know what she's doing. Miles found the binder, read the page, closed it, left it on her desk the next morning, exactly where she'd find it. Nothing said between them. Nothing needed. But the clock was ticking. Open classroom day was 2 weeks away. Caldwell was preparing her showcase lesson for Founders Hall. 300 seats, parents, board members, Vice Principal Ellison, department faculty, every math student in the school, and one special guest, Dr. Nina Ashford, parent board representative and former PhD in applied mathematics. This was Caldwell's annual coronation, the day she proved she was the best teacher in the building. And this year, she had something extra planned, a challenge problem, designed by her. Projected on the big screen at the end of her demonstration, she would invite students to solve it live in front of the entire audience. The problem had 2 layers, an outer layer that looked familiar and an inner layer hiding a trap. She had already coached Daphne privately on the trick at the final step. Daphne would solve it. The audience would applaud. Caldwell would beam. And Miles? If he tried, and she was counting on him trying, he would fail. Publicly, in front of 300 people. But there was one thing Caldwell didn't account for. The trap inside her own problem relied on the exact same boundary assumption she'd gotten wrong on the bulletin board. The exact same blind spot. And modular arithmetic, the method she'd been punishing Miles for all semester, solved it perfectly. Okay, wait. I have to stop here because... This woman literally built a whole trap to destroy this kid. And the one method that solves it? The exact one she's been punishing him for? Nah, that's not irony. That's karma. So now the question becomes, does Miles know what's coming? And Daphne, she knows the trick. She knows Miles's method. She's standing right in the middle of this. What side will she choose? 2 weeks before open classroom day, the pressure was building like steam in a sealed pipe. Caldwell wasn't letting up. If anything, she was pressing harder.
Every class became another opportunity to remind Miles where she thought he belonged. Monday, weekly exam, 5 questions on differential applications. Miles solved every one correctly, but he used his own method on questions 3 and 4. Cleaner, faster, fewer steps. Grade, 78. The note in red ink? Consistently fails to follow prescribed methodology. Points deducted.
It was the first time in his life Miles Montgomery had scored below 80 on a math test. Not because he was wrong, because he was right in the wrong way. Caldwell handed back his paper without looking at him. She didn't need to. The grade said everything she wanted to say. That same week, Coach Gerald Tate, Caldwell's assistant, her loyal shadow, gave Miles a homework assignment on number theory. As he handed it over, he smirked. This one's a beast. Most students need at least 2 hours. Don't feel bad if you can't finish it. Miles finished it in 20 minutes. During lunch, sitting on a hallway bench with his composition notebook on his knee, Tate collected the homework the next day. He flipped through Miles's pages. His face twitched, just for a second. Then he did something strange. Before handing the stack to Caldwell, he pulled out his phone and took a photo of Miles's work. Quick, quiet, almost hidden. Miles didn't see it, but the camera saw everything. Wednesday, Caldwell called Miles to the board in front of the class. She gave him a problem she knew he'd solve differently. He picked up the marker and started writing. His method? Modular arithmetic, clean reduction, elegant steps. Halfway through, Caldwell cut him off. Thank you, Miles, but let's see the correct approach. She called Daphne up. Daphne solved the same problem using Caldwell's method. Same answer, twice as many steps. But it was the approved way. Caldwell smiled at Daphne, turned to the class. This is what proper methodology looks like. Thank you, Daphne. Miles walked back to his seat. The message was loud and clear. In this room, being right wasn't enough. You had to be right the way Caldwell wanted. And if you were Miles Montgomery, even that might not be enough. That night, something cracked. Miles sat in his grandmother's kitchen, notebook open, pencil in hand. But he wasn't writing. He was just sitting there, staring at a blank page. For the first time since he was 9 years old, Miles Montgomery didn't want to do math. Grandma Ruth noticed. She always noticed. She didn't ask what happened, didn't push. She just set a plate of food in front of him and sat down across the table. You know what your granddaddy used to say? Miles looked up. They can change the rules. They can't change the answer. Simple words, nothing fancy. But something behind Miles's eyes shifted. He looked at the blank page, picked up his pencil, started writing. That night, he did something he'd never done before. He went back through every exam Caldwell had given that semester and solved each one using her prescribed method, step by step, exactly the way she demanded. And he found something. On 3 of the 5 most recent exams, Caldwell's standard method produced answers that were approximations. Close, but not precise. Rounding errors buried inside the process. Small enough to pass, not small enough to be correct. Miles's method on every single one produced exact answers. No rounding, no approximation. Clean. He documented everything in his notebook, page after page, her method versus his, the differences circled in pencil. He didn't know it yet, but that notebook was about to become the most important object in the room. Meanwhile, Daphne Sullivan was dealing with her own storm. Caldwell had pulled her aside after class. Private meeting, door closed. Daphne, for Open Classroom Day, I've designed a special challenge problem. You're going to solve it on stage. I'll walk you through the trick at the final step. It will look spectacular on your college applications. Daphne listened, nodded, took notes. But that night, alone in her room, she did something Caldwell never expected. She solved the challenge problem on her own, not using Caldwell's trick, using Miles's method, the modular arithmetic approach she'd studied from her own binder, the one she'd left on his desk. It worked, faster, cleaner, more elegant, and it didn't need any tricks. Daphne sat at her desk for a long time. She folded the paper and put it in her bag. She hadn't decided what to do with it yet, but she knew one thing. The method Caldwell was showcasing as the correct approach had the same blind spot, the same boundary assumption, the same crack in the foundation. And the method she'd been watching Caldwell punish all semester was the one that actually held up. The morning of Open Classroom Day arrived like a verdict. Founders Hall, 300 seats arranged in a gentle curve facing the stage, a projector mounted on the ceiling, a whiteboard on a rolling stand, a microphone on the podium. The seats filled fast. 120 math students filed in first. Then the parents, 80 of them dressed in business casual, holding coffee cups. The school board, 5 of them, seated in the front row with notepads. Vice Principal Dr. Warren Ellison standing by the side door with his arms crossed. And Dr. Nina Ashford, parent board representative. PhD in applied mathematics. She sat in the third row, center. She didn't carry a notepad. She didn't need one. She carried everything in her head. One more person found a seat that morning. Back row, right corner, wearing the nicest dress she owned. Grandma Ruth Montgomery. She didn't tell Miles she was coming. She just showed up, sat down, folded her hands in her lap. Caldwell walked onto the stage at exactly 9 o'clock. Black blazer, hairpinned, confident smile. She tapped the microphone once and began. The demonstration ran smoothly, textbook perfect. She walked through problem-solving strategies, called on students for quick answers, showed off her teaching method. The audience nodded along. Parents were impressed. Board members scribbled approving notes.
Then she reached the final segment, the one she'd been planning for weeks. She clicked the projector. A problem appeared on the big screen. Large font, clean layout, 2 layers of constraints wrapped around an optimization core. Caldwell turned to the audience with a warm, practiced smile. Now, this is something special. I designed this problem to push our very best. I'd like to invite any student who feels confident to come up and try, right here, right now, in front of everyone.
This is what advanced mathematics at Whitfield looks like. Her eyes swept the student section. They passed over Miles, quickly, but on purpose. A flicker of a smile at the corner of her mouth. The trap was set. The stage was lit. 300 people were watching. And somewhere in the back row, Grandma Ruth Montgomery tightened her hands in her lap. She didn't understand a thing on that screen, but she understood the look on her grandson's face. He was ready. But was he ready for what Caldwell had planned? Or for what was about to go wrong with it? Daphne raised her hand, just like Caldwell planned. "Wonderful! Daphne, come on up!" Caldwell's voice was warm, proud, the voice of a teacher watching her masterpiece unfold. Daphne walked to the stage, picked up the marker, and faced the whiteboard. 300 people leaned in. Daphne started writing. Step 1. Solid. Step 2. Clean. Step 3.
the setup for the final move. Then she stopped.
3 seconds of silence. Her marker hovered over the board. The audience held still. Caldwell's smile tightened, just barely. She gave Daphne a small nod. The signal. Use the trick. Finish it. Daphne didn't use the trick. She went back to step 3, drew a line underneath it, and started writing something new. A different approach. A modular arithmetic framework. Clean variable transformation. Boundary case acknowledged and solved. Miles's method, right there, on stage, in front of 300 people. Caldwell's face froze. Not anger, not yet. Confusion. Like watching your own reflection do something you didn't tell it to. Daphne finished, put the marker down, stepped back. Her answer was correct, but the method was not what Caldwell rehearsed with her. Not even close. Caldwell recovered fast. 22 years of teaching had given her that skill. She stepped to the microphone, smooth, controlled. Very creative, Daphne, but that's not quite the standard approach. Let me show everyone the more rigorous method. She picked up the eraser, wiped Daphne's work off the board, every line, gone in 5 seconds. Then she started fresh. Her method, her way. Step 1, Step 2, Step 3, the standard assumption. Step 4, the trick. Step 5, final answer. She turned to the audience, confident, satisfied. And that is the correct approach. But it wasn't. Step 3, the same step, the same assumption. The variable x is always greater than 0. She didn't check the boundary. She didn't test the edge case. The exact same mistake she made on the bulletin board weeks ago. Her solution looked perfect. Sounded perfect. 300 people had no reason to doubt it. But 3 people in that room knew. Miles, sitting in the student section, composition notebook open, had spotted it the moment the problem appeared on screen. He'd been waiting. Daphne, back in her seat, hands folded, heart pounding, knew. Because she'd already solved it the right way. The work Caldwell just erased was the proof. And Dr. Nina Ashford, 3rd row center, tilted her head slightly. Her eyes narrowed. She didn't need a notebook. She saw it. 3 people, 1 truth, and not one of them had said a word. Caldwell smiled at the audience, completely unaware. The question hanging in the air was so thick you could almost touch it. Who would break the silence? And what would it cost them? Caldwell was already moving on, straightening her notes, preparing her closing remarks. In her mind, the demonstration was a triumph. Problem presented, problem solved. Audience impressed. Another flawless open classroom day. Then Miles raised his hand. It wasn't dramatic. He didn't stand up, didn't wave, just lifted his right hand, steady, calm, like he was asking permission to sharpen a pencil. Caldwell saw it. Her eyes locked on him for a half second. Something flickered across her face. Irritation, maybe, or something deeper. She could have ignored him, moved on to closing remarks, thanked the audience, ended the show. But 300 people saw his hand. Parents, board members, Ellison, Ashford. If she ignored him now, in front of everyone, it would look exactly like what it was. So she smiled. The thinnest smile in the room. Yes, Miles? Doctor, Caldwell, I think there might be an issue with step 3. May I come up and show it on the board? Silence. Not the polite kind. The sharp kind. The kind where 300 people stop breathing at the same time. Caldwell tilted her head. Her voice came through the microphone sweet as poison. Miles, this is a demonstration, not a debate. But, she paused, looked at the audience, calculated. Sure, come on up. Show us what you think you found. She leaned on that word, think, like a knife pressed flat against skin. Not cutting yet, just letting you feel the edge. Miles stood up, stepped past the other students, walked to the aisle. Every head in the auditorium turned to follow him. The walk from his seat to the stage was maybe 30 feet. It felt like a mile. He stepped onto the stage, picked up the marker, faced the whiteboard, Caldwell's solution still written across it in her neat, confident handwriting. Then he turned and looked at the audience. 300 faces staring back. And he froze. Not because of the math. He knew the math was cold. He'd known it since the moment the problem appeared on screen. He'd known it since the bulletin board, since his grandmother's kitchen, since a 50-cent textbook and a cracked spine, and 3 weeks of teaching himself what no one else would teach him. He froze because of what came after. If he wrote what he knew on that board, if he proved the most powerful teacher in the school wrong on her stage, on her day, in front of her audience, there was no going back. He still had to sit in her classroom every day for the rest of the year. She controlled his grades, his recommendations, his future. The marker hovered over the board. 5 seconds of nothing. Caldwell saw the hesitation, and she pushed. Take your time, Miles. This is a very challenging problem. She paused. Let the silence stretch. Then added, softly, but the microphone caught every syllable. No one expects... She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. Every person in that room heard what she didn't say. No one expects you to get it. No one expects you to belong here. No one expects anything from you. A murmur rippled through the parents' section. Grandma Ruth, back row, right corner, pressed her hands together so hard her knuckles went pale. Miles stood on that stage, marker in hand, 300 people watching him dangle. Then he looked past the stage lights, past the board members, past Caldwell, all the way to the back row, right corner. He found her, Grandma Ruth. She wasn't nodding, wasn't waving, wasn't mouthing words of encouragement. She was just sitting there, looking at him, with a face that said one thing and one thing only. I've watched you carry this your whole life. I'm not going anywhere. Miles looked at her for 2 seconds, maybe 3. Then he turned back to the board, uncapped the marker. He didn't find courage from anger. He didn't find it from pride. He found it from the quietest person in the room. A 72-year-old woman in the back row wearing the nicest dress she owned, who never understood a single equation he wrote, but who understood him. Miles put the marker to the board, and he didn't hesitate again. Miles wrote the first line, clean, steady. The marker didn't shake. He underlined step 3 of Caldwell's solution, drew a small bracket around the assumption. Then, next to it, in clear block letters, he wrote, "This assumes the function is always positive across the full domain." He turned to the audience for 1 second, not for approval, just to make sure they were reading. They were, every single one of them. Then he went back to the board. He constructed a boundary case, a specific set of values, simple numbers, nothing exotic, where the variable reaches 0. He plugged those values into Caldwell's step 3, showed, line by line, what happens to the function at the boundary. It breaks. Not approximately, not arguably, completely. Caldwell's optimal solution at the boundary produces a result that is mathematically worse than doing nothing at all. Her answer doesn't just become inaccurate, it becomes wrong. He wrote Caldwell's final answer on the left side of the board. Then he wrote the correct answer for the boundary case on the right side. 2 numbers, side by side, different. Undeniably, visually, obviously different. No one in the audience needed a math degree to see it. 2 numbers, they didn't match. That was enough. But Miles wasn't done. He moved to a clean section of the board, and he solved the entire problem from scratch. Not Caldwell's way, his way. Modular arithmetic. The method Caldwell had called unclear. The method she deducted points for. The method she erased when Daphne used it 10 minutes ago on this same stage. His handwriting was steady. Each step flowed into the next like water finding its path downhill. No hesitation, no crossing out, no going back. Step 1. Reframe the constraint. Instead of assuming the function was always positive, he transformed the variable so the boundary case was built into the structure from the start. Step 2. Apply the modular framework. Reduce the problem space. Eliminate the noise. Step 3. Bridge the 2 paths. Show that the standard approach and the boundary approach converge to the same answer when, and only when, the assumption is removed. Step 4. Simplify. The final expression. 1 line, 4 terms, reduced to its absolute cleanest form. On the left side of the board, Caldwell's solution. Half a page of steps, an assumption buried in the middle. A wrong answer at the boundary. On the right side, Miles's solution. 4 lines, no assumptions, correct in every case. He capped the marker, placed it on the tray, turned around, looked at Caldwell, didn't say a word. The auditorium went silent. Not gradually, instantly, like someone had pressed mute on 300 people at once. The air conditioning hummed. A chair creaked somewhere in the back. That was it. Dr. Nina Ashford, 3rd row center, was leaning forward. Her eyes moved across the board. Left side, right side, left side again. She was checking, verifying, running the logic in her head the way only someone with a PhD in mathematics can. Then she nodded, slowly, once. Vice Principal Ellison, standing by the side door, uncrossed his arms. He took a half step forward. His face was unreadable, but his posture said everything. He was paying attention now. Daphne Sullivan, in the student section, closed her eyes. When she opened them, they were wet. She pressed her lips together and clapped once against her knee. Then again. Quiet. Almost private. A student in the middle section started clapping. Then another. Then 5 more, then the parents, then the board members. It built like a wave, not an explosion, a wave, starting small, growing with every second, until 300 people were on their feet and the sound filled Founders Hall from the stage to the back wall. Miles stood on the stage.
He didn't pump his fist, didn't bow, didn't smile.
He just stood there, marker tray behind him, 2 solutions on the board, and 300 people standing. Dr. Ashford rose from her seat. She didn't wait for the applause to die. Her voice cut through it, clear, measured, and loud enough for the entire hall. I want to be clear about what just happened. This student did not simply solve a problem. He identified a foundational error that most graduate students would miss, and his method, the one he used, is more generalizable, more elegant, and more mathematically sound than the standard approach. This is exceptional work. Exceptional. The applause had stopped. Now it was just her voice and 300 people listening. I've reviewed PhD dissertations with less rigor than what I just watched a 16-year-old do on a whiteboard. Silence. Every eye in the room moved to Caldwell. She was standing 3 feet from Miles, stage right. Microphone still clipped to her blazer. 300 people. Parents, board members, her vice principal, her students, all waiting. Her face was a mask, but the edges were cracking. A muscle in her jaw twitched. Her fingers, clasped in front of her, pressed white against each other. The microphone was live. The room was silent. Whatever she said next would be heard by every person in that auditorium. She looked at the board, at her solution on the left, at Miles's solution on the right, at the two numbers that didn't match. Then she looked at Miles. Miles is a very determined student. That was it. That was all she could give. Not brilliant, not talented, not exceptional, the word Ashford had just used twice. Determined. The smallest, safest, most reluctant word she could find that still sounded like acknowledgement. But it was acknowledgement, pulled from between her teeth like a confession, on a microphone, in front of 300 witnesses. And everyone in that room heard what she couldn't say. They heard it in the pause before determined. They heard it in the way her voice flattened. They heard it in the words she chose, and the dozen words she didn't. Miles looked at her, and he did something that no one expected. He nodded. A small, quiet nod. Respectful. The kind of gesture you give someone even when they've never given it to you. Then he stepped off the stage, walked back to his seat, sat down, opened his composition notebook, and started writing down his solution, like it was just another Tuesday. The auditorium was still buzzing, students whispering, parents leaning to each other, board members exchanging glances. But one person wasn't making a sound. Back row, right corner. Grandma Ruth Montgomery stood up. She didn't clap, didn't cheer, didn't call his name. She just stood there, hands clasped against her chest, tears running down her face without a sound. She didn't understand a single line he wrote on that board, but she understood every face in that room. And for the first time in a long time, those faces were looking at her grandson the way she had always looked at him, like he mattered. The auditorium emptied slowly. People lingered. Conversations hummed in the aisles. But behind the noise, 3 things happened that would change everything. The first happened in the hallway outside Founders Hall. Doctor?
Nina Ashford walked directly to Vice Principal Ellison. No small talk, no pleasantries. She handed him a single sheet of paper, notes she had written during the demonstration. Her handwriting was sharp and precise. The notes contained 3 things: Miles's method, broken down step by step, the exact location of the error in Caldwell's solution, and a professional assessment written by a woman who had reviewed doctoral theses for 15 years.
One sentence was underlined. This student's methodology is at the level of a first-year graduate researcher, not a high school sophomore. Ellison read it, folded the paper, placed it in his vest pocket, said 2 words: "Thank you." That paper would sit on his desk by Monday morning, and it would not sit there alone. The second thing happened by the water fountain near the east exit. Daphne Sullivan found Miles. It was the first time she had ever spoken to him directly. She didn't ease into it. "That method you use, the modular approach, I've been studying it. You're right. It's better. And I'm sorry I didn't say something sooner." Miles looked at her. No resentment, no bitterness. "You left your binder on my desk 3 weeks ago. That wasn't nothing." Daphne held his gaze for a moment, nodded once, walked away. Nothing more needed to be said. The third thing happened 1 week later, quietly, by email. Vice Principal Ellison sent a message to every teacher in the mathematics department. The subject line was simple: grading policy, immediate revision. The email was 4 sentences long. The one that mattered read, "A correct solution, arrived at through a valid mathematical method, must be graded on its correctness, not on its conformity to a single prescribed approach. Effective immediately." The rule that was built to cage Miles Montgomery was gone.
And his transcript? 3 exams previously marked down for incorrect methodology were regraded. New scores posted. Final grade, A. Caldwell read that email alone in her office. Door closed. Lights off. She wasn't fired. She wasn't publicly reprimanded. The system moved the way systems always move. Slowly, quietly, with a memo. But the cage she built was dismantled. Permanently. That evening, Miles sat in his grandmother's kitchen, the same kitchen where he taught himself calculus at 13. The same table where he spent 3 weeks cracking a problem from a 50-cent textbook. The same chair where he almost gave up 2 weeks ago. His composition notebook was open. He was already working on a new problem. The email from Ellison, confirming his regraded scores, sat on the table next to his plate, still unopened. Grandma Ruth set a plate of food in front of him, stood there for a moment, watching him write.
I didn't understand a single thing you wrote on that board today.
But I understood every face in that room. They saw you, baby. They finally saw you. Miles looked up, smiled. The first real smile in weeks. Then he went back to writing. Ruth didn't say anything else. She turned to the sink and started washing dishes. The kitchen was quiet, except for the scratch of his pencil and the sound of running water. Some moments don't need words. This was one of them. Doctor, Helen Caldwell still teaches at Whitfield Preparatory Academy. She has not publicly commented on what happened that afternoon. But the following semester, for the first time in 22 years, her grading policy was permanently changed. Method flexibility. Scored on correctness. No exceptions. Miles Montgomery finished the year with the highest GPA in the mathematics department. He received 3 university scholarship offers before the start of his senior year. He was 16 years old.
Sometimes the people who tell you to know your limits are the ones who haven't found theirs yet. Honestly, this one hit different for me. Like a kid teaching himself math from a 50-cent book and still getting treated like he's nothing? That broke me a little. I just wanted people to see him. Really see him. That's why I made this. If this story made you feel something, if you've ever been the person in the back row, or if you've ever been handed a paper face down like it was too good for you, share this with someone who needs to hear it. Sometimes, knowing that someone else fought that fight is enough to keep going. Subscribe, leave a comment, tell me your story. I read every single one.